Greetings and welcome to another video, in which I'm going to talk about the work I used to do producing cartoon animation for the BBC. This is something I did freelance between 1988 and 1993, it's quite a while ago now, and I worked on a children's TV programme called Hart Beat, which was a popular programme at the time. In fact, it was the most popular children's programme in the UK for 2 of the years I worked on it, probably nothing to do with me, but it was a very popular programme, over 10 million viewers a week. But then this was the days of very few TV channels. Things have changed so much since then. And it was a programme that was introduced by an artist called Tony Hart, quite famous as an artist on children's television in the UK. It had several previous programmes, but Hart Beat was the last programme he worked on. And basically what happened in this programme is that he produced various pieces of art, paintings and all sorts of other things. He had a couple of assistants in the studio who also made various works of art. And between the pieces of art they put together, there were animations. And that's where I came in, because I produced some of these animations. And I produced in total 24 short films, between about sort of 15 and 30 seconds length each, between, as I say, 1988 and 1993. So what I'm going to do in this video is to delve into this in various ways. First of all, I'm going to show you some of the films so you've got an idea what we're actually talking about. And then I'm going to look at some of the materials I used to use, some of which are on the desk around here. And then, as you can probably see, I've dug out some of my old artwork. These are boxes of animation paper and cel. They're very heavy, so we can look at some of the artwork I actually produced at the time. And then finally, I'm going to sort of talk a bit more broadly about how I got the job producing animation for the BBC and what it was like shooting animation in television centre, sort of late 80s, early 90s, because it was a very interesting period of time. When I started doing that work, film was still used fairly widely in television. By the time I finished, film was used a lot less widely in television, and that very much was reflected in what I saw across the period of time when I went to do this work. This wasn't a full-time job. This was something I did between about 6 weeks and 3 months a year, depending on how much work they gave me that particular year. So it's something kept coming around. So let's take a look at some of the films. And to do that, we obviously need a means of doing this. And as you probably guess, all this animation was produced for standard definition television, but it was shot on 16mm film. And once the programs had been made, basically what happened was we were commissioned to do animation in around sort of January each year. We were the first people to be commissioned. They worked out the titles for the programs, got the animators commissioned. We all got on producing the animation. It took quite a lot of time. And then they put the programs together in the spring and they went out in the autumn. That's typically what happened. And once they'd had the studio sessions and transferred the film to 2-inch videotape as part of that process, they gave the animators a film print of their work. And I've got all the film prints they gave me here. And of course, being given film prints of 16mm stuff, it's not terribly useful to most people because you can't actually look at it. But for some reason, and I can't remember why now, but it was a good idea at the time, back in 1994, after the programme didn't get commissioned and I'd finished working on it, I got all of this film transferred to one of these. This is actually, you might think this is a Betamax videotape, but it isn't. It's a Betacam SP videotape, the professional version of what Beta became. And I therefore went from having stuff I couldn't watch on film to stuff I couldn't watch on tape. And I say why I paid all the money to get this done at the time, I don't know, but I did. But it was very useful because it meant a few years later, let's put that noisily back in the box, I got this transferred to DV Cam, which I could then bring into a computer, and that's how we can look at the footage which is on these reels today. And I also, of course, recorded the programme off television when it actually went out, and I'll show you a bit of that as well, but clearly there's a difference in quality between the two. Anyway, shall we just open up one of these reels? Because I just want to show you what's inside here, because it might not be what you would expect. So let's put that down there, give you a close shot of that, and we'll open up this BBC film can. And inside there is a bag. Always good to have a bag, isn't it? Exciting unboxing. And oh look, Metro colour, all the old stuff, fantastic. And in here there are 2 reels. And one of these is a reel of film. This is a film print of the pictures for the animations I produced for Hart Beat in a particular year. But this is the sound. This is what they call setmag. And the way that audio production used to be done for film, in fact probably still is done for film, or maybe not quite these days with digital, but the way it used to be done for film is that you actually had the audio on magnetic tape, but it was sprocketed magnetic tape which could be lined up with the film. And eventually, if you were going to have the film distributed and shown in the cinema or something, you would have the magnetic recording track, the audio track here, transferred to an optical track on the film with a picture. But if you were just going to be taking footage like this and transferring it to videotape in a studio session for a TV program, there was no need to do that. But it means, of course, to play this, you have to have a facility for playing the picture and the audio separately and syncing them together. So that's not straightforward. It's amazing, looking at all this, how difficult it used to be just to produce moving pictures with audio to any level of quality. The amount of work that went into doing simple things was extraordinary compared to what happens today. Anyway, let's go across to a computer where I've mounted a DVD I made many years ago that contains clips from the programs as I recorded them from television, as well as transfers from the film that we were just looking at. And I'm going to be a bit careful how I show footage in this video because I don't own the copyright on the material I produced for the BBC. I'm relying on fair use to comment on things I made and were transmitted on BBC One many years ago. And it is standard definition footage anyway, so there's no point scaling it to full screen. It won't look ideal if we do that. Anyway, shall we play the first thing I ever made for television from 1988? This film was called Not What It Seems. Good to see a standard Academy leader here. This is what things used to look like, proper stuff. Anyway, here we go. And there we are. That was my first piece of BBC One. And I'm now going to show you all three films I made in 1989. Very varied films. Let's start these off as well. This first one was called Tunnels and Funnels. Again, we've got the Academy leader. 4, 3. Here we go. I always liked that film. The producer liked that film. There was some I made that everyone just agreed just worked. That one just worked, didn't it? Anyway, the next one coming up is called 3D in Construction, and I'm taking the audio down because this has got a piece of music over most of it, so I'm not going to risk playing a piece of music. No idea where it came from, but anyway, here we go. 3D and Construction, this is called, as I said. And here we have some 3D work which was done the old-fashioned way, drawing it on paper, tracing onto cel and painting it in. But there is a little shot coming up where I actually produced some 3D modelling on a Sinclair QL, printed it on a dot matrix printer and traced it onto cel. And so this shot here, that was produced in part anyway on the Sinclair QL, which is fascinating, isn't it? Anyway, I think we can now have the audio back for the ending as the rocket goes through the ceiling. And then the final film here, what is the final film here? I'm forgetting now. Oh, it's... is it Caves and Caverns? I think it is. Let's have a look. Yes, it's Caves and Caverns. And there we are. I still like looking back at this work I did all those years ago. And I'm sure you want to see something from when one of these was transmitted as part of a program, so I'm going to go into the show reel and just find that exact moment so I don't show you things I shouldn't be showing you. And here we are, all set. The film we've just seen, Not What It Seems, but this time as it was transmitted on television. And the artifact here, I'm sure, is due to the VHS video recording. So let's play the file.
Now that's what I'd call an elasticated pond. You've probably...
And there we are, that's Tony Hart commenting on my animation. I remember very clearly the first time that was transmitted on television. And if you want to see more of these films, it probably doesn't surprise you that somebody has uploaded quite a few episodes of Hart Beat to YouTube. So let's just open up a browser. There is, for example, a site here called Tony Hart Remembered, and it has got quite a few episodes broken down into 3 videos each. These were uploaded a lot of years ago, 15 years ago. And in the video description for this video, I will include links to the particular programs of which I have an animation, including the relevant timestamp. Oh, I didn't show you the end credit to the program, did you? I must do that. I'm sure you want to see my name in the end credits. I will take the sound down though because of possible copyright issues on the closing music. But let's play. This is a montage of end credits. It shows me multiple times. Now they are leaving the studio and I think turning my lights out. Are they going to turn the lights out? They're going to turn the lights out. That's nice, isn't it? And here's the end of the program, and this is what the credits look like in multiple years. And am I there? Oh, look, I was top of a list there. I was Chris Barnatt there. And here it went that way, and I was full Christopher Barnatt there. It changed different years according to how much space I had on the screen. I was Chris again there. And that year, I was also Chris, but top of a list. That's nice, isn't it? And I was top of a list there too. It's good, isn't it, watching yourself going by on the screen. I was Christopher Barnatt there as well. Anyway, you've now seen me in the closing credits of the Hart Beat TV show. Right, shall we take a look at some old filmmaking technology? Here are my few surviving animation paints, although I doubt they would work today. Here is the pencil I drew most of the Hart Beat animation with. And then down here is one of the pens I would have used to ink onto cels. You can still buy these pens today. These are Staedtler pens with a very fine tip, permanent markers. Although in later years, I learnt to use an isograph ink pen with an Indian ink to mark on the front of cels. Basically, the cels, you did the line work on the front and the paint went on the back. With brushes like this, how long did I spend using these brushes? There's one I did fine work with, look. I don't know, it's a year or two ago since I was painting. I used to really enjoy painting animation paint onto cel. I spent so many hours doing it. I remember an exciting day would be when you change colours. And then down here I've also got some what I called sticky holes. If you had rips on animation paper or cel around the registration holes, and you could put these on either slotted holes. I also had round sticky holes. And then if you wanted to mount a piece of artwork for a background or something, you could use a tube of these which contain stick-on registration holes for backgrounds, things like that. And all of these worked with a peg bar. This is a metal peg bar. I used plastic peg bars most of the time when I was working on Hart Beat. I couldn't afford to buy metal peg bars, but I got a metal peg bar late on in the work I did for Hart Beat. And whilst I was finding all of these things out today, I also came across a few other things. Let's just push those out of the way. I also found this, which was my little guide to animation colours I used, which upside down. Look, no, it's the right way around for you, isn't it? And this shows all the different colours I used, I think, on Hart Beat. I think there's a few more than that towards the end. They got really, really wild. Here's a little book. This is my log book for, I think, 1990, well, obviously 1990. And so this contains, look, here's all the BBC production codes. Never really understood where those came from. But I was given those. They had to be recorded on the film at the start, so people knew what it was. And you can see here a little list that shows how I was keeping track of every film I made and all the shots in it. And I don't know. It's amazing looking back at bits of your life, isn't it, how it all worked. There's a very, very long, complicated film there, obviously. And the other thing I came across was this. This is a note from the producer sent after I made my 1989 animations, where he does say that his favourite film was the Great Train Race. I remembered earlier, didn't I, that the producer really liked the Great Train Race. Moving on to my working setup, here's a photograph of me from many years ago. In theory, drawing animation. I clearly wasn't drawing animation, I was posing for a photograph, and for some reason I've got a set square on the drawing board here. I never used a set square, or very rarely had to draw straight lines for Hart Beat animation, but for some reason I am in this particular picture. And I have here that very drawing board made from a thick piece of opaque perspex, and then underneath it is Dexian, bits of wood, bits of aluminium along the top. And because it's opaque perspex, this can be underlit to function as a light box. And then I use this with various top drawing surfaces. This is one of them. This is a piece of perspex with a peg bar. And Animators normally have a disc on their light box so they can rotate it to get the right angle to draw things. I didn't have a disc, I couldn't afford one of the big animation discs, but you could here of course move this around and work from different angles, even for angles like that if you wanted to. I had another one of these which had 2 peg bars on which could slide to wherever I was working on artwork where you had registration both top and bottom, which was often the case. But this was my basic drawing board. And on this you can see something else I made, which is a field guide. It's a very important animation. This is an Academy 12 field guide, which means it's 12 inches across and it's 4:3 ratio. That's what Academy means. And this is how you actually worked out the fields for working on shots. And then animation paper went on top of this. Here's some animation paper, which will register if we can get it in the right place. I wasn't normally working upside down, of course. In those days I was working the normal way around, but for you I'm working from a very strange angle. But anyway, there we are, animation paper on the board I used to do all my animation on. This takes me back such a long way. Anyway, this is blank animation paper, but I think we should now look at some old artwork. Right, shall we take a look at some 37-year-old artwork? Why not? I'll just get the top off and put it down there on the floor. And oh look, it says Hart Beat 88 layouts and dope sheets. So what does that mean? This opening stuff is the stuff that allows you to actually keep track of everything and use it on camera. Here are the what are called dope sheets. I did my own dope sheets, got them printed in pink. I don't know quite why, but this basically keeps track of all the cels in the shot and how time, what's going on. These are for all the different films done that year. It looks, so I changed my pen there. That was exciting, wasn't it? And under there we have the layouts. This shows the cameraman where to frame for the particular shots. There's the little fish we just saw. There's the layout for the pulling of the pond we just saw. And there's layouts here for other films, which you haven't seen. They were much more complicated, the other films. This was a film about him learning to fly, which was there we are, they're all down there. Little bird there. Zoom. So these were all the layouts for that. But let's put those back like that. Put that in the top and be tidy, because there we are, and make it roughly, let's just even it up. And then under here are some of the drawings for Not What It Seems. Let's just take this out like that and take that off there. And as we can see, there is Fisherman Fred sitting at the pond, and then there's the pond itself. And there he is, presumably these, yes, these are the drawings that make him come up and take up the pond, aren't they? And they keep going like that till we get to, there's more bits of pond. I do remember, and it's amazing because it's a long time ago, I do remember drawing this and doing it many, many times to figure out how exactly an elastic pond came up. But there we are. That's here's the last frame there. The last frame is there. So there we are. That's the actual drawings. And I think under here as well, let's just put that back somewhere like that and neaten up then. You spent a whole life doing that when it was animating, you know. And under here we have actual artwork, I think, actual cels. And yeah, that's a piece of blank paper. And, oh look, I think it's the fish, isn't it? There's a small piece of fish coming out of the pond. There's a bit more fish jumping around. A bit more fish jumping around there. And presumably under here, do we go a bit further down? I should be wearing gloves, shouldn't I? One second, let me put my gloves on. That's better. Old Chris would be very mad at me handling cels without gloves. Let's go a bit further down. Oh look, these are the cels for the actual pull-up of the pond, aren't they? Oh, they're a little bit sticking after. How dare things stick slightly after all these years? That's disgraceful. But oh, there's the pond itself without Fred. Oh, we're back into fish now. And then further on, how far do we have to go to get even further on the pond? Oh, it's amazing how well this is held up, isn't it? I thought to myself the other day, I could reshoot this digitally, couldn't I? Because all the artwork's held up really well. I could reshoot some of my old animation. Maybe that'll be a film here on this channel in the future. Getting out a camera and reshooting. Oh, there was a lovely little pop, wasn't there? I love doing little pops and things like that to make things come up, and the things that only happen in the world of cartoons. That little popping thing is coming out, and Freddy's presumably there doing that stuff. That's fantastic, isn't it? But anyway, that's some old artwork. And if you're wondering about the backings I kept somewhere else. Here is an envelope of spray backings, and the reason for that was because some of the backings did get reused. This contains, oh yes, that's the backing for what we were just looking at, isn't it? That's the backing for the pond and a bit of ground. That first year I did a sort of clean line, and later years I decided the earth and the sky had a more graduated feel. But anyway, that's what I did the first year. I look back on that, I wouldn't have done that the same way today, but never mind, that's how things go, isn't it? And let's put that back in there. And I've got various other envelopes here. These brown envelopes, this is how I actually handled a lot of stuff when I took it to camera. I've got one over here, I just reached behind me. So I had loads and loads of these envelopes. This says Tunnels and Funnels. This is from 1989, only 36 years old. And this is what we were just looking at, I think. And if I open this thing up, this is just artwork. Yes, this is artwork from Tunnels and Funnels. If I could just get that somewhere into place. There's again a covering film on the top. And we can see here, this is clearly, that is the ground, isn't it? And the start of the race. And then under here, there's the big train. First had a big train, shot B number 1, looks like. And then L1, oh, it was L and B, wasn't it? This is little train, so little train comes in like this. Oh, here he comes, look. Comes in. Oh, with some smoke coming up. I love doing smoke. A little bit of smoke starts out the chimney. Bit more smoke. Bit more smoke. Bit more... Oh, I've gone past one of the great big piece of smoke, dearie me. Bit more smoke. Ah, this is so cool, looking back at all these artwork from years and years ago. There must be a fantastic opportunity to, as I just said, reshoot some of my old artwork digitally, taking it up to a high definition. We missed one, didn't we? We missed a critical one. Is it a critical one? Not very critical, but anyway, there it goes. Oh, that was painsticking after all these years, wasn't it? Oh, there's the shot of them when he hits him on the head with his funnel. Without the eyes, because obviously the funnel and the eyes were separate, weren't they? So that's how that was done. Oh, it is great looking back at all this stuff. Oh, there's a thump there on his head. I'm getting too excited by this, aren't I? Definitely, I'm getting too excited by this. There's another one of those little things that happen when things hit things in cartoon world. There we are, little yellow thing there, and another one like that. I don't know. Anyway, I think I will put this artwork safely away again. No idea why. It's been there for 36, 37 years, but why am I storing it? I don't know. Maybe because I can reshoot it digitally. Anyway, as I said, I'm now going to talk a bit more broadly about my experiences animating for the BBC. Greetings! Here I am, back again, being excited wearing my painty old white gloves and being reunited with animation cels I haven't seen for so many years. It was a fantastic time in my life when I made these Hart Beat animations for the BBC. But you might be asking yourself, how did I get the job? Did I have contacts in the industry? Well, I didn't. And by the time I was 21, I was studying for an economics degree at University of Nottingham, and I basically thought I could do that. I'd been watching the Hart Beat programme, like many students did on a Wednesday afternoon, because that's what students do. We watch children's TV on a Wednesday afternoon. And admittedly, I had been producing animation for quite a few years by then. I'd been working on pilots for TV series, all kind of stuff like that. That's a subject I'll cover, I'm sure, on this channel in the future. But anyway, I thought I could do the animation on Hart Beat. That would be a good in to doing broadcast TV work. And so I got a load of coins, because in those days it was before we had mobile phones. I was living at the time in the university hall, and there were 2 payphones amongst 200 students. And so I took my pile of coins to one of the payphones in the middle of the day, and I rang up the BBC. And I asked to speak to the head of Children's BBC, and surprisingly I got almost straight through. And they said, oh, you want to speak to a guy called Chris Tandy, who's a producer of Hart Beat. And they put me through to him, and I invited myself to come and see him, show him some of my animation. And I basically walked out with a contract, or at least I walked out with the agreement. I'd get a contract, it arrived in the post, obviously a few days later. And that's how I ended up doing Hart Beat. And it continued. We did 1 year, and then next 5 years when the programme was still recommissioned, they just came back to me and did more and more stuff, which was cool. And the way it was shot, as I sort of said earlier, is that I produced all the artwork and took it down to the BBC to the rostrum cameras there, what were called the Oxberry rostrum cameras. And Oxberry cameras were the standard in the industry for many, many years, many decades for shooting animation. They had a camera which it went up and down so you could zoom in and out of artwork, and then they had the different axes so it could go in X and Y as well, and you had your peg bars and things on it. So wonderful, really sort of solidly engineered things, the Oxberry cameras. I've got a picture here which is not a brilliant picture, but it's all I've got to show you. I took it on one of the times I was shooting for Hart Beat. Here's another one, maybe slightly better quality. Here's a shot of some of the artwork we saw earlier actually on the bed. I think the lights are on here so it's a better photo. And here's a picture of me on the Oxberry rostrum cameras. And it was a fascinating experience working on them. Although I did realise very quickly that they didn't shoot my sort of animation, cell animation, which required a piece of glass on top, very often. Remember the first time I arrived there, the first day I was shooting down there, and they went, "Oh, you've got cels, we're going to need a piece of glass to actually hold things in place, aren't we?" I said, "Yep." And they said, "Oh, And they looked around and they found this really mucky piece of glass covered in finger marks and dust and everything else. And it was like, "I've got my lovely clean artwork. You've got a horrible piece of glass. We're going to be shooting through it." But they did clean it up and it was fine. And every year I went down, the first day I was shooting, they had to find the glass, which went on the top of the camera to hold the artwork down. And in fact, the second year I went down, I was shooting with a cameraman I then shot with, I think, for almost every year after that. And the first piece of glass he pulled out was way too big to fit on between the peg bars with a thing that pushes up and down. And he said, "Sorry," he said, "this is Terry Gilliam's glass." And he was the guy who had shot the Monty Python animations with Terry Gilliam, which were shot apparently on very large boards. They didn't use peg bars, they used little cutouts which were held down bits of tape on large pieces of artwork, and they had a massive piece of glass to hold it all in place. But it was just a moment when you went, all the Monty Python animation was shot here, in this room, on this camera, through that lens, with these lights. It was really cool. And as I said at the start, it was also a time of transition. When I first went down there were 6 Oxberry cameras in use, shooting lots of title work, close-ups for programs, maps and things for documentary, things like that. If there was, for example, a shot of a watch, a close-up of a watch in a drama, it wouldn't be shot on location. They'd bring the watch in and they'd shoot the watch on the rostrum camera. Lots of things like that were done to just make life easier for other people. It wasn't largely shooting traditional cartoon cell animation. But over time, video built up from the late 80s onwards. I remember the year I went in, and it was down to 4 cameras, and they'd got a video camera on a rostrum in a small room shooting work, which was just as good for most programs because you didn't have to shoot it on film, transfer it to videotape. You could just have it on a rostrum camera. You could put it live to a studio. It was a radical idea. And by the last year I worked there was only 1 camera left. Oxberry 2 was still running. And I said to the guy, Laurie, I think his name was, I was shooting with again, I said, "What's happened to all the others?" And he said, "Here you are." And he gave me the keys to all the camera rooms and everything in that part of the East Tower and Television Centre where we were shooting. And I went and had a look. And I think 1 or 2 rooms were basically empty or just full of junk. Some had half a camera in, half an Oxberry rig. Things had broken on one. They'd taken parts to use on another camera to keep Oxberry 2 going, probably. And I remember in one of these rooms was half a camera, and there was about a half-size scale model of the door of 10 Downing Street. For some reason, obviously it'd been used on the rostrum to shoot a shot of, I guess, the door of 10 Downing Street. But it was just surreal to see these bits of these, what were absolutely cutting-edge film rostrum cameras, but of course film rostrum work was changing because video was coming in, the Quantel paint systems were starting to be used more and more with frame buffers. You could do graphics work at least a little bit then on video, so they were changing times. Anyway, I could speak a lot more about my time producing animation at the BBC and some of my experiences on particular shooting days and things, but if I do this video, it'll be far too long. So if you want me to talk more about certain things or maybe go into animation techniques, reproduce some of my old animations digitally, things like this, if you want me to do some of that stuff, let me all know down in the comments section. Oh, and you might be wondering, in these videos I often bring up my excitement scale. How exciting was making animation for the BBC? Well, as you can probably guess, it was an 11, definitely, on the excitement scale. It was one of the most amazing things I ever did because it turned, for me, television into something that was active rather than passive. These days, Anyone can make stuff, chuck it out onto the internet, onto YouTube or wherever, and other people can see it. In those days, you can make films if you wanted to. Getting them to people was impossible. And I actually had the privilege of going, I'll come up with a few things and I'll stick them on BBC One. And I'll do it again next year and again next year. That was an extraordinary, empowering experience. So I look back very positively, as you probably gathered, on my days making animation for Hart Beat. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And I hope to talk to you again very soon.